Thank you for joining the School Turnaround Podcast. My name is Dr. Chance Lewis, and I am so excited today for today's episode because we are here at the School Turnaround National Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we have convened educators from all around the country for today's event. And today I'm excited because we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Alicia Hash, with us. Welcome. So glad you're here with us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so she just delivered a powerful keynote speech for our attendees, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to sit down with her to have a conversation as well. So how are you feeling? You gave a keynote. So what for you? What do you feel is your main message or story that you want the audience to take away from what you delivered today?
Absolutely. As I shared with the audience today, in this space that you all have created for urban educators to come in and just collaborate on solutions to really change the trajectory of our educational system for future generations. Yeah. But what I shared today from a key transformation standpoint is just to remember when you're going into the work of school turnaround and then going from not just turnaround to transformation, you need to be focused on the keys of building community.
Right.
Building a strong school culture. And then you can get to the place of looking at that curriculum from the hidden curriculum and the written curriculum for sure.
And I was glad you brought that up because when you went through the points today and talked about all of that, I loved how you closed it with the care part, right? Caring is so important in this work because people don't really understand the hard work it takes for school turnaround and transformation. They just look at the outside kind of features of, test scores and things like that and just think it's easy work that you could just plug and play, anywhere. So I was really glad to hear the points that you made around the curriculum and the context of the work and all the things and factors that go into it as well. So I know it was well received because I always know because, people take a look and, talk to you after. So I know you had a great crowd afterwards as well. So that's all great. So what I want to do today is just kind of dive in a little bit further for our listening audience to really understand school turnaround and what it takes. So you've been, in hearing your story, you've been in challenging contexts before when it comes to this work, right? So what have you learned about kind of balancing urgency and also patience? Because I know that's hard for a leader because you know where you're going, but you're currently where you're at.
Absolutely.
Right? And so how do you deal with that in driving transformational change?
Yeah. So, and I've shared this, in our first podcast, and I shared when I talk about the journey of my school community when we integrated two schools that were very different demographic school communities, and we were given the gift in the first year of time. Sure. And I always say that allowed us to do things well. Right. So I know from a student outcomes perspective that sometimes school leaders really feel the pressure of you need to get this done right now. Right. But in doing that work, a lot of times we need to take the time to pause to make sure that we have the right people on our team to do things well, and that can't happen overnight. Right. You need to make sure you have the right resources in front of students to do things well, and you need to make sure you have a strategic plan and vision of rollout of how to do things well. So with that being said, I just cannot share enough when you go back to care, so I do want to start there, that this work of school turnaround, it's high intensity. It can be high stress. Sure. So from a school leader standpoint and a staff standpoint, you need to make sure that you are pouring into yourself as much as you're pouring into other people. Right. And then from a timing standpoint, you need to make sure that you are having clear, consistent communications with whatever your school governing body is beyond your school to say, this is the vision, this is what I need. Give us the time to be able to roll this out well. Yeah. Making sure you're bringing people on board in your staffing plan that really align with the strategic needs and vision of the school. Making sure that you've been given some freedom and flexibility around what those resources are going to look like in front of students, and then implementation. We need to realize that in education, we're dealing with children. Right. And I think sometimes we've really lost sight of that,
Yeah.
that we are so into test scores and, the political arena outside of school.
Yeah,
that
we've
this
forgotten.
is the work of children.
Right.
And if we get so far away from that we're not leaning into that, then we're not going to be able to do the work well.
Right. Now, you brought up an interesting point. You had the gift of time.
Yes.
Right. And so, when you kind of look at the landscape, most school leaders aren't given that gift. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of pressures are school leaders under, in that time vein, because you have years of things that are going on, but they say, we put you here and we want results now. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So in most situations that all school leaders find themselves in is you're being rated on benchmark to benchmark.
Right.
Beginning of year to middle of year, middle of year to end of year, end of year from the previous year to end of year.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I know there's a reality sometimes that we do feel that pressure.
Right.
So what I would share with school leaders when you do feel that, when we talked about community, culture, curriculum, there are some quick wins that we can get, when we're looking at curriculum, making sure that your most skilled people who are in the building are the ones who are in front of students.
Got it.
Because we're going to be bringing in teachers who are year one, day one, and we're going to have veteran teachers in the building. But what I would recommend to any school leader is, one, have your research-based program like we talked about, strong assessment, strong interventions that can move students from 90 to 95th percentile or 10 to 20th percentile. Making sure you have that going within the building while you're building that community and culture is going to go a long way.
Right.
But we have people who are curriculum facilitators, who are coaches, who have shown that they're proven in the work of positive student outcomes. And sometimes once we move them from the classroom, then they're not in front of our students, but they need to be.
Yeah.
Whether that's in a co-teaching model, a small group model, whatever you need it to be to get those wins. Because again, sometimes we are not given the gift of time. We're under a time crunch. And at that point, you have the most skilled and qualified people in front of students, making sure they're coaching, they're co-teaching, but having some one-on-ones while you're building the community.
While you build at the same time.
Yes, and culture.
So in thinking about that, so we have this time pressure, right?
Right.
And you have a vision as a leader, and there's so many kind of stakeholders you have to pull together. So I'm thinking about, in all the schools I go in around the country, a lot of times when I talk to school leaders, they don't necessarily understand or have been taught or really know how to engage families and communities and parents, especially in a school turnaround process, right? I mean, it's one thing to get them to a PTA meeting, right? But to get them participating in a school turnaround process is a whole nother thing, right? So from your experience, how are you able to successfully do that?
So going into the principalship, I know a lot of people have their minds, completely focused on two pieces. And it's managerial leadership and instructional leadership. And those are important. But in school turnaround work and transformation work, the micro-political lens of the work that you have to do is really what the driver is.
Got it.
Because what you're doing at all times is you're branding and you're marketing your school.
Okay.
And you're getting buy-in from stakeholders. And that comes from spending time with stakeholders. That comes from hosting meetings, inviting them into your school, having those one-on-one conversations about some opportunity gaps that may be present so that you can have them come in and help support that. But I cannot heavily emphasize enough to new principals and seated principals who've even done this work a long time. Every time you get before any stakeholders, you are marketing and branding your school. And if you want it to be successful, you need to make sure you have a strong vision and mission. And when you speak, they know you mean what you say. They know your heart is in the work, your hands are in the work, and you're there to make sure students are successful.
Now, I appreciate that, because one thing I do know about your story that I think is important for anyone listening to pay attention to was when you involve these stakeholders, you didn't have everybody just come to the school, right?
Right.
You went out into the community. And when I work with schools across the country, a lot of times they don't understand that fact of you have to get out of your building and engage that community. So when you kind of look back, what do you think was the impact of you leaving the building and going out in the community and engaging?
Absolutely. That was extremely important because, we can sit on our campuses and wait for people to come. But when you don't see them, what are you going to do next?
Right.
So we were, very fortunate as a team where we went out to the community center that's near my campus. I've spent a lot of time there.
Right.
Miss T,
I knew that, yeah.
Who leads the community work within the Greer Heights community where our Billingsville campus was. I'm always in contact with her at the center, making sure that I'm visible within the community and not just on campus. Also, your faith-based partners.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time at our faith-based partners church.
Yeah.
Whether it's church services, meetings, sitting on board meetings, making sure they see me and they know that I appreciate the investment they were making into our school community. How can I help give back too?
Right.
How could I be part of the conversation? So all of that matters. And then we've hosted principal chats in one of our apartment complexes near the school in their community rooms.
Yeah.
So just be innovative. Think about it. It's not all going to happen on the school campus. I've been to the preschools that feed into our school, like wherever you can be where people are. That's where you need to be.
I remember the days of the professional developments at the church.
Yes, absolutely.
As well. So all of that's important. But I wanted to raise that because I think, more training in the future should be for school leaders and understanding that community engagement aspect, getting out of the campus, and going out into the community and engaging them as well. But in looking at that, I have another question for you just for sake of time, because I think lost in it, like you said, we're in the work of children, right? And so when we think about school turnaround, oftentimes that stakeholder is left out of the equation in kind of envisioning the plan. So talk about how you engage students in school turnaround.
Yes, absolutely. So I believe that children are at the center of the work that we're doing. So I have, after 14 years in my school community, I'm now serving one of our feeder middle schools as principal. And my first driver, especially when you're looking at middle school students, is building relationships with them first. The same amount of energy I've put into getting to know parents and getting to know staff, I've put into getting to know our students.
Right.
It has been an absolute joy, and just knowing who they are, where they come from, what their interests are, what they connect with, and conversations that you're having with them, it matters.
Yeah, it does matter.
Even in the difficult situations where you have students who may not make the right choice, when you've built that relationship with them, like right now, they're like, Dr. Hash, I'm sorry. And they genuinely mean that. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to make another mistake.
Right.
But I've worked so hard in these first 4 weeks of school for them to know me and me to know them, that genuine connection is, I know, going to take us a long way. And I was able to do that with elementary students too.
Right.
They knew this was their school. They were the leaders. You're the drivers of what we do every day. And allowing student voice and choice is so powerful.
Right.
Do you have a culture that's welcoming to children and they're excited about being there?
And that's beautiful because, so many people leave that stakeholder group out, and the time and investment it takes to get to know them, is so important. But so many school leaders, just kind of overlook that. They're just on to the next thing or trying to just stay on the benchmarks. And that's who we're engaging, the benchmarks around the students. So I wanted to dive deeper into what I call the other side of school leadership, right? Where what the school leader experiences that other people don't see on the outside, but you got to deal with, right? So anytime there's change, right, there's skepticism, right? You have the naysayers and people who put up resistance, right? So this is probably what you've probably dealt with personally as a school leader and many others, around the country. So talk about skepticism and resistance when you're trying to move the needle as the leader.
Absolutely. So again, going back to remember that the work you're doing is to impact trajectory for children for future generations.
Right.
So we know that the power of public education being the great equalizer is that it can, one, break generational curses of poverty in families.
Right.
I mean, that is the reality. We're providing access. We're opening doors for students to really be able to go and have opportunities that maybe their parents and or their grandparents didn't have.
Yeah.
So you're leading with that work. Like, you know that. This is where we're trying to get. We want to have successful students at the end of the day. So a lot of skepticism is going to come when you look at school turnaround, school transformation, changes in leadership, because people, they want results.
Right.
I believe it when I see it.
Right.
So with that being said, you have to have open, transparent communication with people.
Right.
You have to put yourself out there as a school leader in spaces that where you know you may have resistance, that you are going back to your core beliefs. At the end of the day, one, we're going to build a community of stakeholders who want the best for children.
Right.
We're going to make sure that we have a culture that's inviting and producing an environment for students to be successful. And then we're going to get into the curriculum work of teaching and learning to make sure students can be successful.
Exactly.
And when you're feeling that pushback, because you are going to feel it, that's going to be a reality. You really have to stand firm in who you are. I shared in the conference earlier that imposter syndrome and or wondering if I'm the right person to be in the seat at this time is enough. You have to settle yourself in that and know that to be true, so that when you stand up in front of stakeholders, that they know you are the right one and you're there with them, not just because it's you, but that you're there with them to make change for students at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that pushback and the imposter syndrome, sometimes you don't know who's on your side and who's not, as well. But I think, in sticking to what you believe in, it drives it so much further. And that's one of the things I appreciate about you and your work. You've stood by the vision, even when people push back, you press through, and that's so important as well. I want to hit on one or two other things before we close up today. So, as you've moved the needle, professional development, you have to pour into staff and others to train them, to get them to the point of making systemic change, right? So what have you found as professional development that has worked, for you and your school, that has been effective along the way?
Absolutely. So, Dr. Lewis, you've worked with me and staff for probably over 10 years now. And what I think sometimes where we go wrong with professional development is, I'm going to send this team to this conference.
Right.
And that's going to change the world. And that's it.
Not at all.
And I will definitely share that as a principal, how we talk about spiraling curriculum with students, spiraling professional development. When we do the work of cultural proficiency, culturally relevant teaching, that's not a one-time thing. We have spiraled that over years, because education changes, student demographic changes, staff changes, and we want to make sure that we're staying constantly fresh on what's happening. I mean, during the pandemic, we didn't stop professional development. You delivered it to our team virtually, but we kept the work going, and we had to shift what we were doing. How am I educating students in a virtual format? How am I connecting with families virtually? Then after that, how are we coming back to this work after a pandemic? How did that look and different than 2019?
That's right.
And then where are we now? So it's spiraling. It's always changing. But I will share with any educator out there going to a conference that one time, that is going to expose you to the work and kind of get your mind going for innovation. But you need somebody coming in to help walk you through that work and keep that going consistently to see true transformation, from going from turnaround to true transformation.
Wow. And most people don't realize, because, you and I have been partners in this, like you said, over 10 years, and the amount of professional developments that we've done to pour into the staff. And sometimes when you pour into them, you don't see the immediate turnaround, then they get it, right? And that's cool to see as well. So the final question I want to ask you, when you think about sustainable change over time, if you can like issue a call to action for everyone that's listening, whether they be, educators, policymakers, parents, what would you issue as your call to action of what you've seen, what you've experienced, but as you look on the landscape now in today's environment, what would you put out as your call to continue to advance and sustain the school turnaround work? Because we know they need it in every state in the country.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So what would be your call or your advice for anyone that's listening of how to move forward?
From decision maker standpoint to governing school bodies, I will start there. It's one thing I've seen in school turnaround and transformation work that once the principal has done that well for 2 to 3 years, then they're shifted and moved to the next space.
Exactly.
And you need to give school leaders time in that work, in that space, to really make sure that it's sustainable.
Yeah.
My first 7 years in the principalship, I was at a one-campus school.
Yeah.
And then we shifted to 2 campuses, K2, 3, 5, the next 7 years.
Right.
I know that work now, I've invested enough with a very strong team that work is sustainable beyond me now,
right?
In my new school community. One thing principals can sometimes do when you get shifted, you want to take your team with you.
Right.
I made the decision that that's not what I wanted to do because I wanted the work that we had started to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So when you look at school leaders, they need tenure in a space for sustainable work.
Right.
When you look at school teams, that work needs to be sustained too.
I know you had that for real.
Yes, because it is the team beyond the principal is who has their all hands on deck too, and working with the parents, the community, and the students. So one thing I would say is be very thoughtful about principal moves.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful. Part 2 is the investment that we need in supports beyond academics. I was sharing with a colleague who's here at the conference, and he said, you didn't really touch on discipline. Can you talk about that? And I said, what worked so well in our school turnaround and transformation initiative is investing in social and emotional learning personnel.
Right.
So making sure we were able to hire an additional counselor who was an intensive case management counselor who, when our students had true high needs, that she was able to bring in the wraparound services and supports to partner with the family and the student.
Right.
So, beyond making sure that the team is sustainable in the work they're doing, from governing bodies and decision makings, making sure that you have teams who are coming in and really making sure they're focused on the whole child.
Right.
Because those are pieces that matter. And then the last piece that I would add is for new principals who are coming into the work. This is very heavy.
Yeah,
I'm year 15 in now, and my work coming in as year 1 looks very different than even my work as year 15.
Right.
So when we have principals coming into this role in 2025, making sure there is a true onboarding and pipeline, sustainable leadership, because just like there's turnover with teachers, there's turnover with principals. So make sure the coaching and the mentoring for your new generation of leaders, because some of us can see retirement at this point. You can see it now. We can see it now. So making sure that you are bringing in a strong body of school leaders who can carry on the work, and that you're letting tenured principals, retired principals, and veteran principals be able to pour in and help coach them along the way.
Good. So as we get ready to close out, I just want to publicly thank you again for agreeing to be keynote speaker. Like when I called you that day and asked you about being the keynote speaker, I wanted to kind of go in my mind and all the people I know across the country, but I said I wanted somebody who was a real example of doing the work, not just talking about it or theorizing about it as well. So I just want to publicly say on this podcast, I'm very proud of you because I've seen the journey, right? I've seen the progress, I've seen the journey, and I've seen what you've done, and I'm just very proud of you as well. So thank you again for joining the School Turnaround podcast. I really appreciate you being here today. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.